Sometimes the quietest whisper changes everything. In the sterile halls of Seattle's Bayside Medical Center, a billionaire's daughter sat trapped in silence, broken, angry, and ready to give up on life itself. She had lost her hearing in a devastating accident. She had lost her hope in the months that followed. And on one desperate night, she had nearly lost her life. But what she didn't know, what no one could have predicted, was that an ordinary hospital orderly was about to walk into her room and offer her something no amount of money could buy: a chance to be heard. Before we continue, please tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. Jonas Keller's shift was supposed to end 20 minutes ago. He was exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tired that came from 10 hours of transporting patients, restocking supply rooms, and running between floors at Bayside Medical Center. His feet ached, his back was sore. All he wanted was to get home, pick up his daughter Nora from Mrs. Holland's house, and collapse on the couch. But something made him stop. He was passing through the East Wing, the private suites, where Seattle's wealthiest patients recovered in rooms that looked more like hotel penthouses than hospital quarters, when he saw her through the window. A young woman, probably in her mid-20s, sitting in a wheelchair facing the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city lights. Her shoulders were shaking. She was crying.
Jonas had seen a lot of tears in his 4 years working at the hospital. He'd seen families break down after receiving bad news. He'd seen patients weep from pain, from fear, from the overwhelming weight of their diagnoses. But there was something different about this woman's grief, something that made his chest tighten. She was crying the way people cry when they think no one is watching, when they've run out of strength to hold it together, when they've stopped caring whether anyone sees them fall apart. Jonas knew who she was. Everyone at the hospital knew. Mercy Hale, daughter of Corbin Hale, the tech billionaire who'd built Hale Dynamics from nothing into one of the most successful companies on the West Coast. 3 months ago, she'd been in a horrific car accident. She'd survived, but the trauma to her inner ears had left her completely, permanently deaf. The hospital staff whispered about her, about how she refused to eat, about how she'd thrown things at nurses who tried to help her, about how sign language instructors had tried and failed to reach her because she simply wouldn't engage. And 2 nights ago, Jonas had heard the most devastating rumor of all. She'd tried to take her own life. A night nurse had found her in the bathroom with broken glass pressed to her wrist. She hadn't cut deep enough to cause serious damage, but the intent had been clear. Since then, she'd been on suicide watch. Her room had become a prison of fluorescent lights and concerned eyes. Jonas stood in the hallway watching her cry through the window. He should walk away. He should clock out and go home to his daughter. This wasn't his job. He was an orderly, not a therapist or a counselor or anyone qualified to help someone who was clearly drowning in despair. But something in his gut told him to stay.
Jonas thought about his mother, Helen Keller, no relation to the famous one, though she'd heard the jokes her entire life, had been deaf since she was 3 years old. A severe case of meningitis had stolen her hearing, but never her spirit. She'd raised Jonas on her own after his father walked out, working as a seamstress while teaching her son that communication wasn't about sound. It was about connection. By the time Jonas was 5, he could sign fluently. By the time he was 10, he understood that his mother's deafness wasn't a disability. It was simply a different way of moving through the world. She taught him that silence didn't mean isolation. It meant paying attention to the things most people missed: facial expressions, body language, the weight of a person's presence. Jonas had spent his childhood as his mother's interpreter. He'd gone to parent-teacher conferences and translated. He'd helped her navigate stores and appointments. He'd learned early that being deaf in a hearing world required courage, patience, and a stubborn refusal to be invisible. His mother had died 2 years ago, breast cancer. It had taken her quickly. too quickly for Jonas to properly say goodbye. But her lessons had stayed with him. And right now, looking at Mercy Hale through that window, Jonas heard his mother's voice in his head as clearly as if she were standing beside him. The hardest part of going deaf, Jonas, wasn't the silence. It was feeling like no one could reach me anymore, like I was locked in a room and everyone else was on the other side of the glass. Jonas made a decision. He pushed open the door.
Mercy turned sharply at the movement, her eyes wide with alarm. Her hands gripped the armrests of her wheelchair so tightly her knuckles went white. Jonas could see the fear in her face, the same look she probably gave every stranger who walked into her room uninvited. Another nurse, another therapist, another person who would move their mouth and expect her to understand, who would pity her, who would treat her like she was broken. But Jonas didn't speak. He didn't try to explain himself or reassure her with words she couldn't hear. Instead, he walked slowly toward her, non-threatening, careful, and knelt down so they were at eye level. And then he raised his hands. "I see you," he signed, his movements slow and deliberate so she could follow, even if she didn't know the language yet. "You're scared. You're angry. You think no one understands." Mercy's eyes widened further. Confusion flickered across her face, followed by something else, something that looked almost like hope, but more fragile, more dangerous. Jonas continued signing. "But I do understand. My mother was deaf. She taught me this language when I was a child. She taught me that losing your hearing doesn't mean losing your voice." Mercy stared at him. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Jonas could see her chest rising and falling rapidly, could see the tears still streaming down her face. "I know you're in pain. I know you feel alone. But you're not. I promise you, if you let me, I'll help you find your way back." For a long moment, Mercy didn't move, didn't breathe. She just stared at this stranger who had walked into her room and spoken to her, actually spoken to her, in a language that didn't require sound. Then, slowly, she nodded. Just once. Just barely. But it was enough.
The door burst open. What the hell is going on here? Jonas stood up quickly as Corbin Hale stormed into the room. The billionaire was in his late 50s, tall and imposing in an expensive suit that probably cost more than Jonas made in 3 months. His face was red with fury and fear, the look of a father who'd been watching his daughter slip away and couldn't stand to see another stranger near her. "Who are you?" Corbin demanded. "What are you doing in my daughter's room?" Jonas kept his voice calm and steady. "My name is Jonas Keller, sir. I work here as an orderly. I know American Sign Language. My mother was deaf. I saw your daughter was upset, and I wanted to help." Corbin's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Help!" He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a cold, controlled rage. "You saw an opportunity, didn't you? You saw a vulnerable young woman and thought you'd swoop in and play the hero. What do you want? Money? Is that it?" "No, sir. I don't want anything from you. I just know what it's like to love someone who lives in silence, and I know your daughter is suffering in ways that medicine can't fix." "You don't know anything about my daughter." Corbin's voice cracked slightly. "You have no idea what she's been through, what we've been through." "You're right. I don't. But I do know what it feels like to watch someone you love feel completely alone in a room full of people. And I know that sometimes the only thing that helps is knowing someone can actually hear you, even without words."
Corbin opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. His jaw was clenched so tight Jonas could see the muscles working. The billionaire looked like he wanted to throw Jonas out of the room, maybe out of the entire hospital. But then, something made him pause. He turned to look at his daughter. Mercy was staring at Jonas with an expression Corbin hadn't seen in 3 months.
Her eyes were still filled with tears, but they weren't the empty, hopeless tears he'd grown accustomed to. There was something else there now, something that looked dangerously like hope. Corbin's shoulders sagged slightly. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. The best sign language instructors in Seattle have tried to work with her. Therapists, specialists, they all failed. Maybe, Jonas said gently, she wasn't ready to listen yet. Corbin was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone. What did you say your name was? Jonas Keller. Wait outside, Mr. Keller. I need to make some calls. Jonas stepped into the hallway, his heart pounding. He'd just inserted himself into a situation that was way above his pay grade. He'd approached a billionaire's daughter without permission. He'd made promises he wasn't sure he could keep. What had he been thinking? But then he remembered the way Mercy had looked at him when he signed, the way her expression had cracked open just for a moment, the way she'd nodded, giving him permission to try. 20 minutes later, Corbin Hale emerged from the room. Mr. Keller, his voice was still guarded, but the rage had faded into something more complicated. I've spoken with my daughter. She wants you to teach her.
Jonas blinked. Sir? Sign language. She wants to learn from you. Corbin crossed his arms. I'm offering you a position as her private instructor. 3 days a week, 2 hours per session. I'll pay you 3 times whatever you're making now as an orderly. You'll come to our home once Mercy is discharged. If this works, if you can actually reach her, the position is yours for as long as she needs it. Jonas's mind reeled. 3 times his salary? That kind of money could change everything for him and Nora. But that wasn't why he'd walked into that room. I'll do it, Jonas said. But not for the money. I'll do it because your daughter deserves to know she's not alone. Corbin studied him for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, a small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Maybe you are different. Jonas drove home in a daze. The Seattle streets were wet from an earlier rain, reflecting the glow of streetlights and neon signs. He gripped the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. One moment of impulse, one decision to walk through a door, and his entire life had just shifted direction. He thought about Nora, his sweet, curious 6-year-old daughter who was probably already asleep by now. Mrs. Hollins always made sure she was tucked in by 8:30, but Jonas hated missing bedtime. He hated that his daughter went to bed so many nights without hearing her father say goodnight. Nora didn't remember her mother very well anymore. She'd been 3 when Lilac died, too young to hold on to anything except vague impressions and the photographs Jonas kept around the house. Lilac smiling on their wedding day, Lilac holding baby Nora in the hospital, Lilac laughing at some joke Jonas couldn't remember making. 3 years ago, Jonas had kissed his wife goodbye before her routine gallbladder surgery. She'd been nervous, but the doctors had assured them it was a simple procedure, low risk. She'd be home the same day. Instead, a pulmonary embolism had taken her before anyone could do anything to stop it. One moment she was alive, the next she wasn't, and Jonas had become a single father overnight. He'd been in grad school at the time, studying to become a deaf education teacher. It had been his dream to do for other deaf children what his mother had done for herself, to help them navigate a world that wasn't built for them. But dreams didn't pay bills. Dreams didn't provide health insurance for a grieving 3-year-old who needed stability more than her father needed ambition. So, Jonas had dropped out of grad school and taken the orderly position at Bayside Medical Center. It was steady work, decent pay, health benefits, and it let him be home every evening for his daughter. He'd put his teaching aspirations in a box labeled Someday and focused on being the parent Nora needed. Jonas pulled up to Mrs. Holland's house, a modest 2-story house with a porch light that was always on. The retired school teacher had been a godsend when Jonas needed someone to watch Nora during his shifts. She treated his daughter like her own granddaughter, and Jonas would forever be grateful. Mrs. Hollins opened the door before he could knock. "She's asleep," she whispered, her kind face creasing with a smile. "But I swear she tried to stay awake waiting for you. That child fights sleep like it's her personal enemy."
Jonas smiled tiredly. "Thank you, Patricia. I don't know what I'd do without you." "Oh, hush. That little girl is pure joy." Mrs. Hollins patted his arm. "You look exhausted, Jonas. Long shift?" "You could say that. Actually, something unusual happened tonight." He told her about Mercy, about walking into that room, about the offer Corbin Hale had made.
Mrs. Hollins listened with wide eyes. When he finished, she squeezed his hand. "Your mother would be so proud of you." Jonas felt his throat tighten. "I just hope I can actually help her." "You will," Mrs. Hollins said firmly. "You have your mother's heart, Jonas, and that's more powerful than any degree or certification." Jonas carried Nora to his car, her small body warm and heavy with sleep against his shoulder. She stirred slightly as he buckled her into her car seat. "Daddy?" Her voice was drowsy and small. "Hey, sweetie. Sorry I'm late." "It's okay," she yawned. "Mrs. Hollins made cookies. I saved you too." Jonas felt his heart squeeze. "Thank you, baby. That was very thoughtful." "Daddy?" Nora's eyes were already closing again. "Did you help someone today at the hospital?" Jonas paused, his hand on the car door. "Yeah, honey. I think I did." "Good," Nora mumbled. "Grandma Helen always said helping people is the most important thing." Jonas blinked back sudden tears. His mother had died before Nora could really know her, but somehow his daughter had absorbed her grandmother's lessons anyway. "She was right," Jonas whispered. "She was absolutely right." 2 weeks later, Mercy Hale was discharged from Bayside Medical Center. Jonas arrived at the Ashford estate on a gray Thursday morning, his truck looking ridiculously out of place among the luxury vehicles in the circular driveway. The house, mansion really, was stunning. A sprawling contemporary structure with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Puget Sound. The kind of place Jonas had only seen in magazines. A housekeeper answered the door and led him through rooms that could fit his entire apartment inside them. Everything was tasteful, expensive, carefully designed. It felt more like a museum than a home. Mercy was waiting in a large sunroom filled with plants. She was still in her wheelchair, dressed in comfortable clothes, yoga pants and an oversized sweater. She looked better than she had in the hospital, but Jonas could still see the shadows under her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. Corbin stood nearby, his arms crossed, watching Jonas like a hawk. Jonas set down his bag and approached Mercy slowly. He knelt so they were eye level again, the same way he'd done in the hospital, and signed a greeting. "Hello, Mercy. Are you ready to begin?" Mercy stared at him. Then, hesitantly, she lifted her hands and attempted to sign back. Her movements were clumsy, uncertain, but Jonas could make out the shape of what she was trying to say. "I'm scared." Jonas felt something crack open in his chest. He signed back, his movements gentle. "Being scared is okay. We'll go slowly, I promise." The first sessions were brutal. Not because Mercy wasn't trying, she was. But frustration came quickly when her hands wouldn't move the way her brain wanted them to, when she couldn't remember signs she'd learned the day before, when Jonas had to correct her positioning over and over. During their third session, she threw a book across the room. It happened after Jonas had corrected the same sign for the 5th time. Mercy's face had flushed red, her eyes filling with angry tears, and she'd grabbed the nearest object, a hardcover book about architecture, and hurled it at the wall. Jonas didn't flinch. He waited, as her breathing came in ragged gasps, as she covered her face with her hands and her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Then he walked over, knelt beside her wheelchair, and waited until she looked at him. "You're allowed to be angry," he signed. "You're allowed to be frustrated. This is hard, harder than most people will ever understand. But throwing things won't make it easier." Mercy glared at him through her tears. "I hate this," she signed back, her movements sharp and aggressive. "I hate being broken. I hate that everyone looks at me like I'm fragile. I hate that my own father has to learn a new language just to talk to me." "You're not broken," Jonas signed firmly. "You're different now. That's not the same thing."
"You don't understand," Mercy signed, and Jonas could see the desperation in her eyes. I had a life. I had plans. I was supposed to take over my father's company someday. I was supposed to... Her hands faltered. I was supposed to be normal. Jonas sat back on his heels. Then he pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. It was a picture of his mother, Helen, at her sewing machine. She was smiling at the camera, her hands paused mid-stitch, her eyes bright with joy. "This is my mother," Jonas signed. "She was deaf from the age of 3. She raised me alone. She worked as a seamstress for 40 years. She taught me that normal is just a word people use when they're afraid of different." Mercy stared at the photo, then at Jonas. Did she ever wish she wasn't deaf? Jonas considered the question carefully. I think sometimes she wished the world was more accommodating, but she never wished she was someone else. She told me once that being deaf taught her to see the world more clearly than most hearing people ever would. Mercy's hands trembled as she signed, "I don't know how to see anything clearly anymore." "Then let me help you," Jonas signed. "That's why I'm here." Have you ever watched someone learn to trust again after they've lost everything? It's not a straight line. It's not a steady climb upward. It's messy and non-linear, full of breakthroughs followed by setbacks, hope interrupted by despair. But it's also one of the most beautiful things you'll ever witness. Over the next several months, something shifted. Mercy started showing up to lessons on time, then early. She started practicing between sessions, her hands moving through signs as she sat by the windows overlooking the water. She started asking questions, not just about the language itself, but about Jonas's mother, about deaf culture, about the community she was now part of, whether she wanted to be or not.
And Corbin Hale surprised everyone by throwing himself into learning alongside his daughter. The billionaire CEO, a man accustomed to boardrooms and business deals, sat through Jonas's lessons like a devoted student. He practiced signs while on conference calls. He hired additional tutors to work with him on days Jonas wasn't there. He was determined that his inability to communicate with his daughter would never again be the barrier that kept them apart. Jonas watched the relationship between father and daughter begin to heal, and it filled him with a quiet satisfaction he hadn't felt in years. But he noticed something else too. He noticed the way Mercy's eyes lingered on him when she thought he wasn't looking, the way her smile became more genuine when he arrived, the way she laughed, really laughed when he told stories about his mother's mischievous sense of humor. And Jonas had to be honest with himself. He noticed because he was looking for it. Because somewhere between correcting hand shapes and celebrating breakthroughs, between witnessing Mercy's worst moments and watching her slowly piece herself back together, Jonas had started falling for her. 6 months into their lessons, Jonas did something impulsive. He brought Nora to a session. Corbin had mentioned wanting to meet Jonas's daughter, had expressed curiosity about the little girl Jonas mentioned so often, and Nora had been begging to see where her daddy went 3 times a week. So, on a sunny Saturday morning, Jonas drove to the Hale estate with his daughter in the back seat, chattering excitedly about the castle they were going to visit. Mercy was in the sunroom when they arrived, practicing signs with a book propped in her lap. She looked up when Jonas entered, and her expression shifted from concentration to surprise when she saw the small girl holding his hand. Nora stared at Mercy with wide, curious eyes. Then she stepped forward and signed, "Hello, my name is Nora. You're very pretty." Mercy's mouth fell open. She looked at Jonas, then back at Nora. "You know sign language?" Mercy signed to the little girl. "My grandma Helen taught me before she died." Nora signed with the confidence of someone who'd been using the language since before she could speak. "Daddy says she was the smartest person he ever knew." Mercy's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were happy tears. "Your grandma sounds wonderful," Mercy signed. "She was," Nora agreed. Then she climbed up onto Mercy's lap like she'd known her for years. "Daddy talks about you all the time. He says you're very brave."
Jonas felt his face heat up. Corbin, who'd just entered the room, was trying not to smile. Mercy looked at Jonas over Nora's head, her expression soft and wondering. "Does he now?" she sighed.
Jonas cleared his throat. Shall we begin today's lesson? Nora changed everything. The little girl became a regular visitor to the Hale estate, her bright presence filling the enormous rooms with laughter and energy the house had been missing. She taught Mercy signs Jonas hadn't gotten to yet. She showed her games and jokes and silly songs translated into hand movements, and Mercy blossomed under the attention. She'd never had siblings. She'd grown up in a world of boarding schools and tutors, of business dinners and charity galas where children were expected to be seen and not heard. But Nora didn't care about any of that. To her, Mercy was just her dad's friend who needed help learning to talk with her hands. Corbin Hale watched his daughter play with the 6-year-old and saw something he'd almost forgotten existed. Pure, uncomplicated joy. One afternoon, after Nora had convinced Mercy to play Tea Party using elaborate sign language commentary, Corbin pulled Jonas aside. "Your daughter is remarkable," Corbin said quietly. "Thank you. She gets it from her mother." Jonas watched Nora carefully position stuffed animals around an imaginary table while Mercy signed dramatic dialogue for each character. "You've never really told me about your wife. If you don't mind me asking, what happened?" Jonas was quiet for a moment. "Pulmonary embolism during what was supposed to be a routine surgery." He swallowed hard. "One day I had a partner, a co-parent, a person to share my life with. The next day I was alone with a 3-year-old who kept asking when Mommy was coming home." Corbin's expression softened with understanding. "I can't imagine. At least when I lost Mercy's mother to cancer, we had time to prepare, time to say goodbye. You didn't even get that." Jonas hadn't known that Mercy's mother had gone. She'd never mentioned it in their sessions. "How old was Mercy when she passed?" 16. Corbin's gaze drifted to his daughter. Elena was the heart of this family. When she died, the house became a mausoleum. I threw myself into work. Mercy threw herself into school and activities. We lived in the same house, but stopped really living. And then the accident happened, and he trailed off. "And you almost lost her, too," Jonas finished quietly. Corbin nodded. "I've built a tech empire worth billions, Mr. Keller. I've solved problems that brilliant minds said were impossible. But I couldn't help my own daughter. I couldn't reach her." He turned to face Jonas directly. "You gave me my daughter back. Whatever you're charging me, it's not enough. I'm not doing this for money, Mr. Hale. I know. That's why it's working." 13 months after Jonas had first walked into Mercy's hospital room, everything changed again. It was a warm evening in late summer. The sun was setting over Puget Sound, painting the water in shades of gold and pink. Nora was inside with Corbin, the two of them building an elaborate blanket fort in the living room, a project the billionaire CEO approached with the same intensity he brought to board meetings. Jonas and Mercy stood on the balcony, watching the light dance across the waves. Mercy had been walking for months now, her physical recovery complete, even if the emotional healing was still ongoing. She looked healthy, strong, more confident than Jonas had ever seen her. She had started volunteering at a center for deaf youth, using her experience to help others navigate their new reality. "I've been thinking," Mercy signed, her hands moving gracefully through the warm air, "about what my life would be like if you hadn't walked into my room that night." Jonas turned to face her. "You would have found your way eventually. You're stronger than you think."
"I don't think so," Mercy signed, honestly. "I was ready to give up, Jonas. I had given up. And then you showed up and refused to let me disappear. I saw someone who needed help," Jonas signed. "I couldn't just walk away." "Why not? Most people did." Jonas hesitated. How could he explain that moment in the hallway? The pull he'd felt toward her pain, the voice in his head that sounded like his mother, the knowledge that he had something precious to offer. "My mother taught me that silence doesn't mean someone has nothing to say. She taught me to listen with more than my ears. And when I saw you that night, I heard you screaming even though you didn't make a sound." Mercy's eyes glistened with tears. "Thank you," she signed, "for hearing me, for not giving up, for showing me that losing my hearing didn't mean losing everything." "Thank you," Jonas signed back, "for letting me in." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sun sink lower on the horizon.
Then Mercy did something that made Jonas's breath catch. She reached out and took his hand. Not to communicate, not to practice a sign, just to hold it. Jonas looked down at their joined hands, then up at her face. Mercy was watching him with an expression that was both nervous and hopeful, vulnerable and brave. "Is this okay?" she signed with her free hand. Jonas's heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. "Yes," he signed back, "more than okay." Falling in love wasn't something Jonas had planned. After Lilac died, he'd assumed that part of his life was over. He was a single dad with a young daughter and a demanding job. He didn't have time for romance. He didn't have the emotional energy to open his heart again. But love, Jonas was learning, didn't care about his plans. It crept up on him during afternoon lessons when Mercy would laugh at one of his stories. It ambushed him when she signed something particularly clever and looked at him with bright, triumphant eyes. It overwhelmed him when he watched her interact with Nora, so patient and gentle, so clearly falling for her as much as his daughter was falling for her.
And Jonas realized something that both terrified and exhilarated him. He wanted this. He wanted her. He wanted a future that included Mercy's smile and Nora's laughter and the possibility of building something new from the broken pieces of their pasts. But there was a problem. A significant, impossible-to-ignore problem. Jonas was an orderly who made $40,000 a year. Mercy was a billionaire's daughter who lived in a mansion overlooking Puget Sound. He drove a truck held together by duct tape and hope. She'd grown up attending charity galas and traveling the world. What business did he have falling in love with someone so far outside his world? The confrontation came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Hollins, of all people, called him out on it. He was picking up Nora one evening. "Jonas Keller, we need to talk." Jonas blinked. "Is everything okay? Did Nora?" "Nora is fine. She's upstairs playing. This is about you and that young woman you're teaching." Jonas felt his stomach drop. "Mrs. Hollins, I don't know what you—" "Don't you dare lie to me, boy." Despite her small stature, Mrs. Hollins could be formidable when she wanted to be. "I've watched you these past months. You come home from those lessons glowing. Nora talks about Miss Mercy like she's already planning the wedding. And just now when I mentioned that the Hales invited us to dinner next week, you looked terrified." Jonas slumped into a chair. "It's complicated. Love usually is, but running from it doesn't make it less complicated. It just makes you lonely. She's a billionaire's daughter. I'm nobody. What do I have to offer her?"
"Oh, Jonas," Mrs. Hollins took his hand, "you gave her back her life. You showed her she wasn't alone. You made her believe in herself again. And you think money matters more than that? Her father looks at you like you walk on water. That man would give you anything you asked for because you did something his money couldn't buy. You saved his daughter." Jonas shook his head. "I didn't save her. She saved herself. I just showed up." "Exactly. You showed up when no one else did. And you're still showing up. That's not nothing, Jonas. That's everything." The next day, Jonas made a decision. He asked Corbin Hale if they could speak privately. They met in Corbin's home office, a room lined with books and awards, with a massive desk that probably cost more than Jonas's car. Corbin poured them both whiskey, even though it was only 2 in the afternoon. "You look nervous, Mr. Keller. Should I be worried?" Jonas took a breath. "I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it." Corbin leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Go on." "I'm in love with your daughter." The words hung in the air between them. Corbin didn't react immediately. He took a slow sip of his whiskey, his eyes never leaving Jonas's face. The silence stretched out, heavy and uncomfortable. Finally, Corbin spoke. "You think I didn't know?" Jonas blinked. "Sir?" "Jonas, I've been watching you two for months. I've seen the way you look at her, the way she looks at you. I've seen my daughter smile more in the past year than she has in the decade since her mother died. I've watched her transform from someone who wanted to die into someone who can't wait to wake up each morning. And you think I don't know why? I know I'm not. I mean, I don't have anything to offer her. Not really. I'm just...
"You're just the man who gave me my daughter back," Corbin interrupted. His voice was rough with emotion. "You're just the person who saw her at her lowest point and didn't look away. You're just the one who taught her she was still whole even when she felt shattered." Jonas felt his throat tighten. "I don't want you to think I had ulterior motives. When I walked into her room that night, I wasn't—" "I know." Corbin stood and walked to the window overlooking the sound. "That's exactly why I'm not kicking you out of my house right now. Because I know your intentions have always been pure. I know you love my daughter for who she is, not what she has." He turned back to face Jonas. "But I need to know something. Are you sure about this? My daughter has been through hell. She's still healing. She's still figuring out who she is in this new reality. If you're not absolutely certain—" "I'm certain," Jonas said firmly. "I love her. I love her strength and her stubbornness and the way she refuses to let anything defeat her. I love how gentle she is with Nora, how she's thrown herself into helping other deaf youth, how she laughs at my terrible jokes even though she can't hear the punchlines." Corbin was silent for a moment. Then, to Jonas's surprise, he smiled. "Then you have my blessing, for whatever that's worth." Jonas felt like he could breathe again. "It's worth everything, sir." "Just promise me one thing," Corbin said seriously. "Anything. Don't call me sir anymore. If you're going to be part of this family, call me Corbin." Jonas told Mercy how he felt on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. They were in the sunroom, just the two of them. Nora was at school. Corbin was at the office. It was just Jonas and Mercy and the afternoon light filtering through the plants. They had been practicing a complex conversation when Jonas stopped mid-sign. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond."
Mercy's eyebrows drew together with concern. "Okay." Jonas took a breath. 13 months ago, I walked into your hospital room planning to offer you a few minutes of comfort. I didn't plan to stay. I didn't plan to become your teacher. I definitely didn't plan to fall in love with you. Mercy's eyes widened. "But I did," Jonas continued, his hand steady even though his heart was racing. "I fell in love with your determination, with your courage, with the way you fight for every small victory and refuse to let anything keep you down for long. I fell in love with the way you are with Nora, the way you light up when you master a new concept, the way you make me laugh even on my worst days. I know I'm not what anyone would choose for you. I'm not rich. I'm not impressive. I'm just a single dad who works at a hospital and drives a truck that barely runs. But I love you, Mercy, and I needed you to know." For a long moment, Mercy just stared at him. Her face was unreadable. Then tears started streaming down her cheeks. Jonas felt panic rise in his chest. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have—" Mercy launched herself at him. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him, hard and desperate and filled with all the words she couldn't speak. Jonas caught her, his arms coming around her waist, and kissed her back with equal intensity. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Mercy was crying and laughing at the same time. "You beautiful idiot! Of course I love you. I've loved you for months. I just thought you saw me as a student, as someone broken you needed to fix." "You were never broken," Jonas signed firmly. "You were just lost for a while, and I'm honored I got to help you find your way back." "You did more than that," Mercy signed. "You gave me a reason to want to find my way back. You and Nora both." She kissed him again, softer this time. "I love you. I love you so much it scares me." "Good," Jonas signed with a smile, "because I'm terrified too."
6 months later, Jonas and Mercy stood in the backyard of the Hale estate, surrounded by friends and family. It was a small wedding. Nothing like the elaborate affair Mercy could have had if she'd wanted it. Just the people who mattered most. Corbin walked his daughter down the aisle with tears streaming down his face. Mrs. Hollins sat in the front row, already crying into a handkerchief. And Nora, the flower girl, signed "I love you" to both Jonas and Mercy as she scattered rose petals. The ceremony was conducted entirely in American Sign Language. The officiant signed the vows. Jonas and Mercy signed their responses. Every word, every promise, every declaration of love was made with hands moving through the air, painting their future into existence the same way Jonas's mother had taught him language was meant to be used, to connect, to communicate, to build bridges between souls. When the officiant finally signed, "You may kiss your bride," Jonas took Mercy's face in his hands and kissed her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Because she was. Life after the wedding fell into a beautiful rhythm. Jonas finally finished his degree in deaf education with Corbin's encouragement and financial support, though Jonas insisted on treating it as a loan he'd pay back. He started teaching at a school for deaf children, finally living the dream he'd put on hold years ago. Mercy threw herself into advocacy work. She used her father's resources and her own experience to create programs for newly deaf individuals, support groups, sign language classes, mental health resources. She became a voice for people who'd lost their hearing, showing them that life didn't end when silence began.
Nora gained a mother who loved her fiercely and whom she loved just as much in return. She taught Mercy all the things a 6-year-old considered important: how to make the perfect pillow fort, which cartoon characters were cool and which were lame, and how to braid hair properly. And Corbin, the billionaire CEO who'd once measured his worth by his company's stock price, discovered that the greatest success of his life wasn't Ashford Dynamics. It was watching his daughter thrive. It was gaining a granddaughter who called him Grandpa Corbin and demanded bedtime stories. It was welcoming a son-in-law who'd proven that character mattered more than any bank account. The Hale estate stopped feeling like a mausoleum. It became a home, filled with laughter, with signing hands, with the kind of love that doesn't require sound to be heard. 2 years after the wedding, Jonas found Mercy in the nursery they'd just finished decorating. She was standing by the window, one hand resting on her swollen belly, watching the sunset over Puget Sound. Jonas wrapped his arms round her from behind, his hands covering hers. "What are you thinking?" he signed against her shoulder. Mercy turned in his arms. "I'm thinking about that night in the hospital, when I was ready to give up, when I thought there was nothing left worth living for." "And now?" Jonas prompted gently. Mercy's smile was radiant. "Now I have everything. A husband who loves me, a daughter who makes me laugh every day, a father I can actually talk to again, and soon a baby who'll grow up knowing that different isn't broken, it's just different." She placed Jonas's hand on her belly. "This little one is kicking. She's going to be a fighter just like her mama." "Just like both her parents," Jonas corrected. They stood together as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. And in that moment, Jonas thought about all the choices that had led him here. The decision to become an orderly instead of a teacher, the shift that ran late, the moment he'd seen Mercy crying through a window and chosen to walk through the door.
Any one of those choices could have been different, and if they had been, he wouldn't be standing here now, holding the woman he loved, feeling his daughter-to-be kick against his palm, living a life richer than any amount of money could buy. Here's what Jonas learned. Kindness isn't a grand gesture. It's not about saving the day or being a hero. It's about seeing someone else's pain and choosing not to look away. It's about offering what you have, even when what you have seems small and insignificant. Because sometimes the smallest offerings are the ones that change everything. A hand extended in darkness, a moment of understanding, a promise that someone doesn't have to face their hardest days alone. That's all Jonas had offered Mercy that night in the hospital, and it had been enough. If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it.
Leave a comment telling me about a time someone showed you unexpected kindness, or a time you showed it to someone else. And don't forget to subscribe, because every week we're sharing stories that remind us what it means to be human. Stories about connection, compassion, and the quiet miracles that happen when we choose to care. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Until next time, keep your hearts open and your hands extended, because you never know whose life you might change.